Hello Pontiac lovers and welcome to my build. I wasn't originally going to make this video, but after getting into it, I'm still in the early stages, but I've got the car stripped. I couldn't find, there's a few videos out there, but not a hell of a lot of info, so I figured I'd throw it up, and if it helps anyone in the future for their build, all the better. Now bear in mind when watching this video, I'm not a mechanic, I'm an electrician by trade. I'm definitely no engineer, fabricator. I do have, minor experience mainly with boats as far as engine building goes. So everything you see in this video it's all information that I've come up with on my own, and it is what it is. So don't take everything in this video as gospel. It's just the way I wanted to do things after doing my research. Right or wrong, if you've got ideas that where I could have improved, by all means, please let me know in your comments. So just to start on the base car, it's a 1979 Pontiac Transam Firebird, which I picked up for a great price considering the COVID tax increase a couple of years ago. I've driven around a bit. I love the car. It was actually one of my boyhood dreams. I nearly purchased one of these when I was 18 and didn't have the funds, so it's one of those dreams that has finally fruitioned. I've had a lot of fun in the car since owning it, but anyone who knows these cars, it came out standard with a 403 Oldsmobile, and even being a 400 cubic inch V8, it was terribly uneconomic and super slow to my standards. After driving the car for a period of roughly around 2 years, the stereo died on me, and I decided I wanted to upgrade the stereo and the audio system. While I was at it, I thought, well, I might as well relocate the battery to the boot, where most electronics are going to be for the stereo anyway, which led to removing all the interior, and then I decided to fix the interior floor up a bit and dynamating it. And then while I was recabling the battery cables, I thought, well, while I've gone this far, I might as well pull off the front end and pull out the old 403, which I wanted to do anyway somewhere down the track. And pretty well led to a complete overhaul of the car. So after serious consideration, I love the old engines. I love the fact that the old engines are 400 block. But after some serious consideration, the money I'd spend on doing the old engine up to get it up to a decent spec where it'd run some strong figures. And anyone who knows my other videos knows we're a little endowed in the jet sprint scene where the LS class is ever evolving. So I decided to pull the trigger and go for an LS swap. Because I could get more horsepower for less bucks, and it's an economical V8 that is reliable and fuel injected, which is great. So where I'm at with it at the moment, engine's out, interior's out, the front subframe chassis off, the firewall's been sandblasted and painted, the underneath has been cleaned and painted, fuel tank's been out. I modified the existing fuel tank to accept fuel injection fuel system, which I'll go through later. The engine I actually picked up from a Wreckers. It's a 6 litre L98. It's an Australian version LS V8 engine that comes out of a Holden Commodore in Australia. It's a 2010 model with roughly around 100,000 Ks on it. I've fitted it, I've modified the front subframe to suit, which I'll show you in a second. My engine mounts, which are from Tough Mounts, have been fitted, welded up, which I'll go through. And the engine's ready to be sent off to the builders. It's going to be built. We've decided to add on a supercharger while we're at it. Nothing crazy, just we're pushing for around 12 PSI. We are using an M122 Eaton supercharger, which is a top mount roost blower. And yeah, that's what we're at with it. So I'll run through the car quickly and where I'm at, and we'll keep going. This might not be applicable to a lot of guys, but this car was originally right-hand drive. And you can see here where they've actually pot riveted on a plate and cut holes to put the steering wheel over this side with the brake booster. And over this side, it's all been butchered to suit the old air conditioner. The old air conditioner had a big box which sat out here, which I've pulled off. I've actually decided to go with a vintage air conditioning system because I wanted to get rid of that big box and free up, make the engine bay look a lot cleaner, which was the whole reason for relocating the battery and everything in the first place. So I'm actually having a whole new firewall laser cut, and I'll probably stitch weld that on, seam seal it, paint it, and hopefully that'll give me a nice clean fresh look. This is a subframe chassis, which is a bit different. So it's been converted for right-hand drive. So we've got a different bracket here for the steering pump, and modified there to suit the linkages, which was done previously by one of the old owner. I believe it was done back in the 80s. I have used Tough Mounts engine mounts. I got them in an exploded version, so they're unwelded and in pieces, so that I could make them up to suit this particular application. You can see here I've actually modified the subframe. That's the recess, the alternator, which I'll show you in a video later. It'll make more sense. So I should also mention, to do this, I actually got an engineer out, had a chat to him first in regards to what I wanted to do, got his advice on how to go about it. And then once I was done, I had it all mocked up. I actually got him back out just to check what I'd done. He was happy with it. I got the final weld done. And then when it's all back and installed, I will get him back out to certify it. So highly recommend that, guys. If you're unsure of anything, it doesn't cost a hell of a lot. Get an engineer out, get him to inspect it, give you the right advice, and then go from there. So this is the engine I decided to go with. It's a 6-litre L98 out of a 2010 Commodore, basically an LS2 variant. So a couple of things we're going to change on this motor, which is specific to my Trans Am build. So the power steering pump over here actually clashed with one of the suspension members. So I've decided to get rid of that. I'm actually going to go electric. I'll show you that in a minute. The air conditioner, which mounts down here, actually clashes with the subframe. So I've actually had to buy a bracket from a vintage air mob, which is going to relocate the air conditioner up here. Other than that, it's going to be kept pretty well standard. Alternator's staying in the same spot. Water pump's going to be in the same spot. Only difference is we'll have a big damn supercharger up here, which will be great. And the other thing is I had to do a reverse hump sump. That's just an eBay job. Seems to do the job. We'll find out when we fire it up. My engine bin will have a look at all that. So with the fuel system, we are going to use Bosch fuel pumps. These are high pressure fuel injection pumps. I'm going with Joules. This is going to be an underbody tank, which will come off the fuel tank. So idea is we'll have another pump, which will pump fuel into this reservoir tank. And then these two pumps will pump out to the fuel injection rails on the LS motor. Running this tank because I'm using the existing stock tank. I've modified it to get fuel into this, but this will make sure there'll be no surges from the fuel flowing from side to side in the original tank. Hopefully keep fuel pressure up to the fuel raise, especially with that supercharger in play. That's something I'm working on at the moment. I'm making up a makeshift bracket to go under the car, which will go on there like that. Set it down a bit, and I'm hoping that should work quite nicely, but we'll find out. I just thought I'd run through some of the parts that I'm going to use for my build and why. Firstly, I went with the L98, which is a L76 or LS2 variant. I bought this motor because it's a lot cheaper than the LS3 at the moment, by about half. Still makes great power. It's got the rectangle port heads, so I can get some good flow out of it. And the engine's going to be built anyway. So once I've got it all my mock-up done, I'm going to send the engine off, put some decent components in it. Because it's having the supercharger put on, just get it up to a spec where I know it's a reliable street car. So in regards to the supercharger, we are using the Eaton M122. Reason I decided to go for that. I didn't want a ridiculously insane, powerful engine. It just puts out some nice PSI at low range, and it's cheap for what it is. You can go ridiculous with those things, but I'm working within a budget. That's one thing to mention also. If anyone tells you they can just throw an LS in to whatever car, sure, there's a couple of things I'm going to do that you could have done a hell of a lot cheaper, but it's not a cheap exercise, guys. If you really think you're going to get away with it, you're kidding yourself. So just a heads up. The gearbox, the engine's out of a VE, Commodore, Holden Commodore, GM. They came out standard with a 4L60 gearbox. After my research, I found out that once you start putting some decent horsepower through those gearboxes, they do have a tendency not to last, which I didn't want. My other option was using a newer gearbox out of our VF Commodore, which is a 6L80E. The drama with that in my particular build is that I would have had, they are a large gearbox, and I would have had to modify the trans tunnel, which I didn't want. I want to cut and shut the car as little as possible. I don't want to make any major modifications because I am trying to keep it in a reasonably standard condition, just for the charisma of the car. I don't want to go making too many cut and shuts. So that wasn't really an option for me. So what I decided to do, I was either stuck between a Turbo 400. The original gearbox was a Turbo 350. But I really wanted that overdrive gear, so I looked into it and ended up coming out with a gearbox called a 4L80. It's not a gearbox that came out in any of our Australian vehicles. It's an American gearbox they tend to use in their trucks, from what I can gather. I was able to get it easy enough. It's from B&M. I got it, purchased it from a store in Melbourne. They freighted it up within a couple of days, and I had to get a flywheel, and I'll probably get a stall converter to suit it as well. So in coming up with the engine gearbox combo, I originally had thoughts of utilising an original loom from a VE Commodore and modifying it to suit. That was going to be quite costly to do with the gearbox because the gearbox is automatic and electronically controlled. I would have had to modify the loom pretty significantly to make that match. So, as well as crack the ECU and a few other things. So after talking to a few lads, we've decided to go with a Holley loom. It's actually a Holley Terminator X-Max, which will actually match the LS and gearbox combo with fly-by-wire throttle controller and pedal, which should hopefully be pretty well plug and play. The other thing I've worked out is because the LS will have an electronic OBD port on it, I can actually get a custom set of gauges to suit this vehicle from Dakota Digital, and buy a module that pretty well plugs straight into that OBD port. Do some basic programming on the gauges, and I get brand new gauges without having to run a heap of extra wires for more sensors all over the new engine. As well as have new updated gauges that look fantastic. So I'm looking forward to that. The gearbox mount, I ended up using the original gearbox mounting bracket. I've had to modify and shift it back a little bit, and weld on a couple of extra brackets, which is fine. It's worked out quite well. With the shifter, I'm going to use the original shifter. I've got a kit from a mob called Shiftworks. They actually send out a kit to marry the original shifter to that 4L80E, which should work out quite well. The drive shaft, I'll have to get modified, the existing drive shaft modified, because it'll be a different length with different splines. It shouldn't be too much of a drama because both ends are pretty well standard. The fuel system, because we are going supercharged LS, it needs to be upgraded to a high pressure fuel system. I'll be using Bosch fuel pumps. I will run one fuel pump to go from the original tank into a surge tank, which I'm going to mount underbody, and then out of that surge tank into dual Bosch fuel pumps, and then run in braided dash line. I'll run up to the front fuel rails to give us that high pressure fuel system, out of the fuel rails into a Holley fuel regulator, and then a return line back to the surge tank. As well as adding all that power, as you can see with these cars in particular, the subframe is not connected from the front to the rear. It's actually two separate sections. So what we're going to do to combat this is I've actually got some subframe connectors. So once the car's all back together and everything's finished, I've got all the weight, the engine, all the cowlings and all the fairings and everything back on, all the weights back on the car, I will actually weld subframe connectors in, which will actually marry the front subframe to the rear subframe and make it a rigid frame. That way, with all the power we're going to put into it, the car is going to twist. It's not going to crack any bodywork or flex the car too much, and should hold it together nicely. We'll see how we go. All right, well, that'll be it for now, and it'll be a series video. We'll do it in a couple of stages once I get some more parts and get further in it. Hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you want to see. Cheers, bye.